My name is Tony Bates, and I spent over 50 years conducting research into the effectiveness of technology for teaching in higher education, with a particular interest in video. In this video, we're going to focus on the production of a broadcast quality video that uses physical modelling to explain a mathematical expression. And I've deliberately chosen this because it's 50 years old and was one of the first examples of using video for teaching in higher education. And I've chosen this example because it stands the test of time. Even though the technology has changed immensely over that 50 years period, this video is still very relevant today and works very well today and is still available and being downloaded on YouTube. Professor John Mason is a former professor of mathematics at the British Open Universities, and he made many videos in conjunction with the BBC for various Open University math courses. Let's take a look at a short extract from one of his videos.
This square has sides a plus b by a plus b. It's made up of 4 pieces, each one of which is formed by choosing either an a or a b in this direction, and either an a or a b in this direction. For example, a by a, b by a by b, and b by b, which adds up to a total of a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. Well, that's the square. How about the cube? The name gives it away. Use a cube and compute volumes. Here is such a cube. It has sides a plus b, and a plus b. And as you can see, it comes apart into little pieces. Each one is formed by choosing either a or b in the 3 directions. This one is b by a. Let's store that over here. Now there's another piece at the back here which is exactly the same shape. So I'll put it in the same place. And on the top here, there's another one like those, but I'm not sure where it is at the moment. Here's a bigger piece, which is a by b by a by b by a. Let's see, there's the little b cubed. We'll get rid of that one immediately. Now there are 2 more big ones here. The same volume. Here's the missing one. And finally, a cubed, which, all added up, gives me a cubed plus 3a squared b plus 3ab squared plus b cubed.
This is another general principle of video, and that it's good for providing concrete or physical demonstrations of abstract principles. And it's also a good example of a high-quality video made in a television studio with a specifically created model of a cube. I talked recently to Professor Mason about his pioneering use of video for teaching mathematics. This is what he had to say.
Well, my name's John Mason. I've spent very nearly 40 years at the Open University in the Faculty of Mathematics, moving into mathematics education in the process. I've been retired for about 13 or 14 years, I can't remember.
I asked Professor Mason why he used a physical model to explain a plus b cubed.
One of the principles that I think we were working to, even though we didn't necessarily articulate it in the early days of the Open University, was to try to make something, the word people want to use is concrete. I don't like that word, but something physical, which could be moved around, shifted, played with, and so we looked at a unit that we were writing, a week's work. Excuse me. We looked at a week's work, and we looked for ideas in that week's work that would have some physical manifestation. And we were very familiar with doing that with cubes.
This program was made through the Open University's partnership with the BBC. I asked Professor Mason what the process was for making these mathematics video programs.
Not only did we work in course teams at the Open University, but we had a team of people to construct each of the television programs, the video programs. And so there was usually two mathematicians from the Open University. There was a producer who had, if not a mathematics degree, was well versed in mathematics. There was a senior producer who was also well versed in mathematics. Then there was, I think there was a couple of other people, but I can't quite remember. Sometimes people from the Institute for Educational Technology also sat in on those, in the early days at least. I don't remember with that one whether that was the case. And we would bat things around. People would make proposals and suggestions, and ultimately the producer would say, I like that one, or I don't like that one. And we'd go with the producer's choice because they felt that they knew what could best be displayed on television.
I asked how students use these videos in their studies.
So with the television programs, students were expected to watch them, and there were some questions and some exercises which made use of the ideas in the television program, which students could work on or work with if they so wished. Well, there was a whole range of things. There were people who didn't feel they had time to watch television at all, so they didn't. There were people who thought they didn't have time to read the units, so they didn't. It was quite a range. I think some students watched them individually at home, or possibly at a study center. Some watched them in small groups and then talked about them. And that's the kind of leading towards the way of working that we developed. I think it's quite difficult to say how somebody used something, because there's something pervasive and, I want to use the word, infusive about images, that later on when you're reading something which is vaguely or even closely related, these images can come back unsolicited. They simply pop back into your mind through the associative mechanisms of the brain, and so they can inform your thinking without you really being aware that, oh yes, I'm using something from the television program. So the real power, not just of images, but of dynamic images, to indicate things changing and other things staying the same, is a really important aspect of dynamic images. And as I say, these can then inform your thinking without you being necessarily aware that that's what's going on.
I also asked what the impact was on students' learning.
There were surveys that I think you and others conducted at the Open University and IET. But in my subsequent shift into mathematics education, I became very wary of trying to look for effects of simple causes, because even just interrogating my own experience, much less listening to other students speaking, it seems to me that it isn't one thing or another thing which makes a difference. It's the constellation of things, of experiences, that can enrich my experience of some mathematical topic. And I've come relatively recently to stress the importance of the personal narrative. There are other people have other language for that as well, but for the personal narrative as to what something is about the value in, before you leave a video, before you turn it off. I mean, it may have stopped, but before you turn it off and move your attention to something else, trying to provide yourself with a narrative as to what you thought you saw. Not necessarily what was it about, but what you thought you saw. And that is tremendous value in enriching that experience so that it becomes available later for reflection for you. So I resist trying to say whether the television and the radio and the units and what was it that had the impact, because it was each student tended to put their attention on aspects of the course materials, the resources that we provided. They put them there. They put their attention in ways which they felt was important for them. I think many of them would have benefited if we'd spent more time on ways of working on the resources that we were offering. But at the time, all our energy was devoted to getting the resources prepared so that students had something to work with. And it was only laterally that I began to think about the pedagogical implications, the ways of working with video, with exercises, with text, with radio broadcasts, with tape frames, which for me is really the important part.
I remember a fascinating discussion at a course team meeting, mathematics course team meeting when I was there, about whether mathematics was purely about symbols and symbolic manipulation, or whether it was about the real world and physical, how it relates to the physical world. Does television help to bridge that kind of argument? Or?
It's about constructing meaning for yourself. I can't see how to maintain a position in which learning is something about being, imprinting and habituation. There's something much more going on. And for me, that's it's all about the personal narrative based on the images that we have and the experiences we have. And video provides the dynamic that we're actually used to as human beings.
Would you still see a role today for video, given all the other developments we've had in media and so on? And do you still think it should be used as multimedia or as a standalone media?
Let me start with some of my conjectures. One of my conjectures is that any mathematical topic that you want to expose people to, whether in primary, secondary, or even in at least the first 2 years of university, is based on a phenomenon which can be displayed in some manner, either in the material world or in the screen world with computer animations. And it seems to me a tragedy not to make use of the dynamic that animation offers, or video, that animation or video of people using physical objects, but let's just call it animation, that animation offers to contribute to the richness of people's experience with a particular mathematical topic. And furthermore, bearing in mind that there are different ways of working with an animation. So in the BBC style, you tell them what you're going to show them and then you do it, or you tell them what you're going to do and then you do it, and then you tell them what you've done, and usually a voiceover telling you what to attend to. And at the other end of the spectrum are animations which are completely silent, and in which the very silence draws the attention into making of a personal narrative, which then can be discussed with other people and modified and corrected by reviewing and so on. One of the things that video does is it releases the tutor, the teacher, from having to be present. So one of my questions that I like to ask lecturers is, do you need to be present for the students to learn this concept, or to gain mastery over this procedure? And usually the answer is no. But the question then is, what kind of resources do the student need in order that they can appreciate and comprehend the concept, or in order that they can gain some facility with the procedure?
Can I ask you what you feel are the drawbacks or any other benefits of video that we haven't covered? Or
I think it's a real challenge to make use of the material world, physical, having physical objects in order to show some process. That requires, as far as I can see, that really requires professional expertise to do something like that. So, for example, suppose I wanted to, in a mechanics program, show a truck lifting one of these great big heavy skips, and how it does that, how the hydraulics work, or a construction crane, one of these great tall construction cranes with a great long boom and these concrete weights at the other end. How does all that work? That requires professional, I think, requires professional expertise in order to display it.
By professional, you mean media production?
Yeah, I mean people who know how to use a camera properly, and also have a little bit of finance behind them, so they can get to places that the rest of us can't get, and that sort of thing. And that's something that I felt was pretty difficult, and I think for an individual lecturer, it's quite difficult to imagine doing that unless you have access to production resources. For me, mathematics is about the study of relationships. It's relationships which may be invariant, even though the components may change. Now, one of the standard ways of looking at a relationship in mathematics is as a ratio. Looking at the ratio of two things, like speed, for example, is a ratio of two things. And I've never yet been able to find a way to depict ratio without the viewer already knowing that two things form a ratio, and that ratio will be invariant under scaling. I just haven't been able to. So there are some things which are quite difficult to present visually. But that said, I maintain this other conjecture that every mathematical topic is based on a phenomenon, and that phenomenon can be exhibited, can be displayed in some manner. And then as long as the students have the pedagogical experience, or the ways of working to work on the video, then they can really get an appreciation of the phenomenon.
If I could pick out the most important points from Professor Mason's interview, they would be these. Video can provide powerful physical representations or analogues of abstract or dynamic concepts. Learning is a dynamic process, and video can help students to develop a personal narrative about what they are learning that leads to deeper comprehension. Professional production facilities can enable high-level representation or presentation of concepts that would be difficult or impossible to do in other ways. This is an example of relatively high-cost video, which draws not only on the knowledge and skill of the instructor, but also the understanding of what video can do from professional program makers. Since many professionally made videos are nevertheless available now as open educational resources, you could still make use of such professional production in your own teaching by directing students to them. Your job then will be to provide the necessary learning support, such as discussion or feedback on the video. There is one more video in this series about different studio arrangements for recording videos made by UBC Studios. For more on the research that underlies these videos, and for more examples of video use in higher education teaching, see Chapter 8.4 of Teaching in a Digital Age. This is a free, open access online textbook for instructors.